Tonight's The Truth Unlimited Victorious Outcast video podcast is supported by the Total Life Changers, where your health matters. Awaken your mind, body, and spirit with the popular products NutriBurst Dietary Supplement and ISO Tea with the dynamic full spectrum of hemp extract from Total Life Changers, where we provide products and community that you will feel. Also, be ready in 2022 to join the Destiny Reignition Program, a mindset-changing course that is taking people from potential to power. Be on the lookout for more information about that shortly in 2022. Registration will Welcome. I don't know how many more times I can tell you welcome. I guess enough time to remove this. Booyaka. Welcome to the Victorious Outcast video podcast. I'm your man, Destiny Dan, and today we are having the theme of surviving the journey with a special guest. I need you to stay tuned. Stay with us because we're going to be discussing some of the themes of the month of April, which are childhood awareness, sexual abuse awareness, wellness, and self-care. So I want you to stay tuned because here we have our special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, today on the Victorious Outcast video podcast, Surviving the Journey episode, our special guest for April, the month of sexual and children's abuse awareness, is none other than super counselor, author, woman and children's advocate, and everybody's favorite school and family counselor, ready to help us navigate the issues of sexual and child abuse, stress management, mental, physical, self-care, and wellness. She comes with us with a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology, Master's of Science in Education in Guidance and Counseling, and a Master's degree in Mental Health Counseling, and continuing her education in school administration with a passion for working with children and families, and having worked for the New York City Department of Education for 18 years. Her experience also includes 7 years as a welfare specialist for the administration of children's services, as Paying Wisdom Forward is what we do. Our guest continues to pour into the lives of young people and girls in particular, as she has established Real Girls, Real Feelings, and empowered curriculum-based group for girls ages 9 and 10. As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, she began writing poetry on her journey to healing. and is particularly a Christian at the Greater Allen Cathedral located in Jamaica, Queens, active in several ministries. And in addition to writing The Journey Continues, she will be publishing her next book, Guide to Supporting Girls Who Have Been Abused, in the summer of 2022. Won't you put your hands together for Siah B. Hagin? Woohoo, 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 woohoo. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Welcome, my dear sister. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure
Thank
and
you.
an honor to have you with us today. How you doing?
I am doing well. Wow, what an introduction. I'm just like, is that me?
Well, we like
So
to
thank
give
you for
honor
that.
where honor is due.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. In these trying times, it is no wonder that I feature folks who can help us with the stress management, with the understanding of how complicated not only our lives are, but our neighbors, our community, and the young people that we want to model righteous behavior in front of.
Yes.
So it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here. How has your day been?
My day has been okay. It was a little hectic, but the day is now over. The work day is now over. So I really try to be intentional when I come home to kind of just bring myself down from the day, particularly if I had a stressful day. And that may include not turning on the TV and just listening to music or, reading a book. So my day was okay. My day was okay.
That's cool. That's cool. Let us be present to the theme of the day, which is surviving the journey.
Yes.
And one thing I like to do is to have our guests kind of get to know, have our audience get to know our guests a little bit on a personal level. And that just means, why don't you tell us where you're from and what a favorite artist or song is of yours,
Hmm.
and we'll start from there.
Okay, so I was born and raised in New York, um, and Jamaica Hospital, I believe. I take
Okay,
it. And I grew up in Laurelton, Queens, and I presently reside in Forest Hills. So I have one other sibling. It's two of us, just two of us, our older brother, and we're 2 years apart. So yeah. As far as a favorite song
or
um,
artist.
or artist,
Yeah, someone who makes you feel warm and fuzzy or hype and happy.
so I have always loved BB Winans. He is like one of my favorite artists. I love the whole Winans family, but I particularly love BB Winans. I've always I've always loved him, and I continue to follow him today. And he's just, he's just awesome. So he gives me the warm and fuzzy. His music calms me, um, and also motivates me. So I would probably say that he is the one of my favorite artists. Yeah.
Yeah, his sister does it for me as well. In terms of their spirit can transfer through their music in such a way that it can change the atmosphere for you and give you hope and soothe your soul in
Yeah.
these challenging times.
Yep.
Now, when you were growing up, did you have a good support system around you? Were you empowered by the community?
So I would definitely say I had a great support system around me. I had working parents. Both of my parents worked. I remember when we were younger, um, we would be dropped off by the babysitter, and the babysitter would pick us up from school when we were younger. And then, of course, as we got older, we walked to school. But I remember having a very close relationship with my neighbor. My best friend lived next door to me growing up. Um, and I remember the block I grew up on, which is in Laurelton, Queens, 230th Street. We just kind of looked out for each other. All the kids knew each other. Um, we watched out for each other. Their parents knew us, and they were like our parents. So, yeah, I would definitely say that was the case. I had a supportive environment.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I had my best friend across the street. He used to teach me all the latest dances so I can be current with my moves as I grew up. And close to the park on 133rd and Linden Boulevard. So it used to be Jamaica, then they redlined it, and now they call it South Ozone Park.
Yes, yes,
You know, you know how that goes.
yeah.
Um, I, I was enjoying your book. Um, the journey continues.
Mm-hmm.
Stories of a survivor.
Yes,
I'm just loving it. It's here. Y'all got to pick it
yes,
up. And I know that you had your work, your calling
mm-hmm.
stems from an incident that occurred when you were in your younger days. But before and after, how would you just describe your experience of growing up, and how did you transition in and out of the challenge that you had that brought on your calling?
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
um,
um,
I would say
I would
I definitely had
say
a pleasant childhood, very normal childhood. Like I said, I had working parents. We were taught to appreciate the value of hard work. Our job was to go to school and to get an education and to be the best person that we could be. My parents used to always say that you get all you can get from your education and be the best person that you could be. Um, so we always had that we always knew that we would continue with our education, that we had to better ourselves, and that meant continuing to go to school. So prior to my abuse taking place, I pretty much had a normal childhood. um, it was somewhat challenging thereafter, because I had to kind of navigate, um, kind of navigate how I was going to deal with that in my life. And it wasn't until later on that I actually really had a conversation with my parents so they could fully understand what was going on. So the abuse had to do, was with a family member. It actually happened on two occasions, once when I was 12 and once when I was 14 years old. And both of those individuals were, one was a relative. Actually, one was a relative and one was considered to be a relative. So they kind of happened in house. Um, when I was 12 years old, that person um, just kind of violated me, as because our parents would go out together and they would go out to eat. And that's when the abuse would occur. And when I was 14 years old, that particular person lived with us, right? So, in order for that to stop, I had to make a decision to speak up, which is such a challenge for so many survivors because there's a fear attached to that. And then after that, that was just a matter of navigating of how to deal with the abuse in my life. So,
I,
but prior to that, I had a normal, childhood, so.
now, does suppression occur when someone so young goes through a traumatic experience because we don't want to reveal the experience because of shame and guilt?
For me, I can't say it was suppression so much. I think it was actually believing that it actually happened. right? So it's
Mhm.
like you have to first acknowledge it. For anybody who's going through trauma or abuse, you have to acknowledge that it has happened or it is happening. And I think for me, being that I was 12 and 14 years of age, I think the reality of this is really happening, um, I had to kind of wrap my head around that. Um, and one of the things that kind of hindered me in actually wrapping my head around that is that my last abuser would tell me, like, why are you upset and why are you crying? And he would try to convince me that what he was doing was okay. And so that also prevented me from actually acknowledging that this was happening and this was wrong. And I always say that, of course, I didn't know God the way that I know Him now in my life, but it was only God, which I contribute to my healing. It was only God that pushed me to not even just talk about it, but to say, no, this is not correct. Because I was raised in the church. My parents are Christians, and I had the foundation, thank God. And I knew enough to know that something was not right. So, yeah.
This is not an a secluded story. This happens to many folks because there are many broken folks who are breaking others in the effort to try to repair themselves. And they would project their dysfunction onto other people. I know at around between 8 to 12, I too had a sexual molestation incident with a close friend of mine's older brother, where he would try to get me in the basement and show me pornography. And in his mind, he thought he was doing some type of sexual mentoring. But in my mind, it basically caused me to develop low self esteem, develop a type of outcast type of syndrome. And so I kind of grew up um, magnifying every place that I didn't feel like I stood, that I had a place in, and every place that I felt like I wasn't like another one. And it just really took a long time to overcome that and navigate that and connect to my Lord, to have Him switch the paradigm and
Yes.
move from what happened to me that was meant for evil and turn it around to now a ministry of moving folks from outcast to overcomer. So I can relate to surviving the journey.
Yes. And it's funny that you should say that because years later, one of my survivors did reach out to me and say, "Hey, listen, um, I want to tell you that I'm sorry and that um, what I did to you was done to me." And it's very
Mm.
rarely that survivors get that kind of, I don't know if the word is explanation or get that acknowledgement from their abuser, but I did get it, and it was like a wow moment for me. It was a wow moment for me.
Is that when, or is that incident how the book, journey came about?
So the journey came about by totally accident. Um, when I really realized that I needed to deal with all of my feelings, I didn't immediately run to therapy because it was just like, well, I'm starting to talk about it and I share it with people who I'm close to, and I thought that I was okay. It wasn't until I was a young adult that I went to therapy, but I was writing, and so I was expressing my thoughts through writing, and I was writing poetry, and I didn't know it, and so through the years, I just wrote things down as I was feeling it. I would just write it, and I ended up, like I said, writing poems, and one day God was like, okay, so you're going to publish these. And I was like, huh? What? So for those people who know me, they pretty much know that I'm a private person, and I kind of like stay to myself. I'm kind of, and so I knew, and I kept asking God, okay, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do this? And it just came back, yes, yes. It was constant confirmation, and I knew at that time that my life would be different, like that I would be, for example, talking to you about this, and sharing my story when I meet people, and at vendor and events. So I knew my life would be totally different, and it has been. It has been totally different. I am not a front and center person. I'm a behind the scenes, what you need help with person, right? And
Mhm.
my life totally changed. So the journey, although I felt like when I was writing the poems, it was for my personal healing. I never knew one day that those poems would be published. So that's kind of how the journey came about.
Got you, got you. Now, is there a dominant reason for sexual abuse and why it occurs? Like, is there like a an umbrella reason, the majority reason, or is it a combination of things?
I wouldn't say it's a dominant. I would say, just to kind of go to what you were saying before, broken people, so hurt people. So hurt people hurt people. And then sometimes, if that's not the case, we may see something and do something. And I'm particularly talking about, you know, um, when we're small and when we're children, and we act it out, or we see things growing up and we think it's okay to do. Um, and then you have people who that's what they do. They have other issues that require more support, mental health issues, diagnosis. So I don't, I can't say there's one exact, cause or one main reason why people do that. I do know that the world is really not, nice and welcoming for survivors. If we look back in the last couple of years, and even from, you know, everything that's been in the news and highlighting individuals, survivors are not really believed. And oftentimes, what that does is that um, feeds the frenzy, for lack of a better word, of I'm not going to speak up, and this is why I don't speak up. It kind of feeds that frenzy, because like look what happens when survivors do speak up and they're not believed. So that is so unfortunate, and it used to happen. There is a lot more awareness. I'm grateful for that. Are more aware. Companies are more of no nonsense policies that they are implementing because of this, and all the things that has happened in our society for over the last couple of years. But it's still not a welcoming place to embrace survivors.
Has the Me Too movement been helpful?
Yeah, I think the Me Too movement has been extremely helpful. It has brought to the attention of those who may not want to look at survivors, or who may not want to acknowledge that this is a problem. And, just to say that there are male survivors too, right? Just like you just gave that example of your experience. There are male survivors too, and but we don't often hear from them. We do have rare occasions that you may hear a celebrity, particularly a celebrity male, who may have said something like, I think, a Tyler Perry or a Common, and I think both of these men have experienced sexual abuse. But it's very rare that men speak up about it and they talk about it. But that is also changing as well, because even with them sharing their stories, it opens the door. So, regardless of whether you are a male or female, sharing your story and getting to the point that you can, because some survivors, they can't yet, they're not there yet, right? Um, to share their stories. And Me Too is just that example, right? It's a movement of survivors sharing of this one particular survivor who has shared her story, and it has just kind of charged a movement. So it has been really helpful in forcing society to look at this issue, right, which continues to be an issue.
And realistically, most of it is illegal, right? It's against the law to abuse
Yeah.
another person, especially women. Um, okay, yeah, I just
Yes,
wanted to make
yes,
that
it
clear.
is. And it also goes, when we think about that, we can't help but to think about domestic violence. Same thing, right? Yeah. However, as we have seen, people do get away with, you know, the behavior. And a lot of times it's because the victim, unfortunately, it does not press charges or is afraid to for whatever reason, right? So it may be I'm afraid to press charges. I'm not in a situation with a domestic violence case. I'm not ready to leave my abuser. One of the things that I constantly say is that we, as a society, we don't understand that when it comes to domestic violence or interpartner violence, which is what we call it now, um, the victim is more likely to be seriously harmed or killed when they decide to leave their abuser. Um, and people always ask, "Oh, how come she doesn't leave the situation?" Because that increases her chances of being killed. And a lot of people don't understand that. You know.
Yeah, it's a misogynistic society, and the power sometimes lies with the male and sometimes the male of a particular group. And in order for us to try to maintain some semblance of normalcy, navigating life and trying to move forward economically, socially, we weigh the consequences and fear takes over. Now, let
Yeah.
me ask you this: as a mental health counselor, a psychologist, a guidance counselor, is there a modeling component to this? Can someone who has no proclivities to this type of practice learn it from, let's say, their parents or extended family or peers?
You mean as far as learning
Be
how to
abusive. Hmm.
abusive? I think
Hmm.
it's like I think it's similar. So I don't know if there is a particular model, but I will say that there is, just like mental illness, if it runs in the family, right, then you're likely to have it, right? Or there's a chance that you may have it. And it's the same thing of if I'm watching this and I'm seeing this growing up, this is what I'm learning. And so I may think this is what love is, or this is what love looks like. So I'm going to repeat that behavior because this is all I know, right? And I think this is what love looks like. And it requires somebody to say, "Hey, this is not what love is," right? You may have seen this, and then that's when you have to go into the support of therapy, right? Whether it's individual or group, and say, I now have to unlearn this. I have to now learn of how to be more healthy, to make more healthy decisions so I can have more healthy relationships. But if you don't acknowledge that there's a problem, like we were saying earlier, you're not going to you're not going to go down that road or make that journey to be healthy. So I think it's the kind of the same thing when it comes to mental illness, or if there's like alcoholism in your family, then there's a greater chance. It's the behaviors that we see as we are growing up, and it takes somebody to say, hey, this is not healthy, right? If you don't know.
Yeah, it's a hard call to know
Yeah.
if it's going to impact your safety or not to pull the curtains off of that bad behavior.
Yeah.
How and when does a person know, or you in particular, that you need to seek support?
Okay. So that's a loaded question. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start. I'm going to start with myself. Um, so for me, like I said, I thought I was fine, and I had not gone to therapy. But for me, I always had a mistrust, a great mistrust with when it came to men. And somebody that I was very close to at the time, she said, "Well, have you thought about that your mistrust when it comes to men has to do with your abuse?" And I kind of looked at her and I was like, "No, I never." And I think it was that following Sunday, I went to service. And Reverend Elaine, who's now pastor, Elaine Flake, had preached a sermon. I think it was called "The Day My Dungeon Shook." And I was at the altar. And I knew at that moment that I had to start therapy. Um, and that's kind of how I started. That message changed my life. It changed that it made me realize that I needed to seek help. And because I was talking about it, not freely talking about it, but I had shared it with people I trust, I thought I was okay. But that message changed my life. And thereafter, I went into therapy probably the next week. So for me, it was God pulling me and telling me that, okay, you need to get help for this. Now, for um, others who, how do you know that you need to seek support? What is different about your regular routine? Like if you're not able to kind of go throughout your day and do the things that you normally do, if you're constantly being triggered, if you're constantly having flashbacks of the time of your abuse, those are all indicators that you need to seek support. And so that's why we have therapy, right? That's why we have support groups. Even if you're not sure, right? And if you have been abused or you experience some form of trauma and that keeps resonating and it keeps coming up and you're not able to function the way that you usually have functioned, then it's time for you to seek support. And you know how you normally function, right? And so that's when it's time to seek support. If it's hindering you from moving forward, if it's hindering your growth, if it's hindering you from having healthy relationships, right? And abuse does all of that, and then and even more, right? Um, then it's time to seek support.
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself. If something is getting you stuck, and you're tired of being stuck,
Yeah.
um, then you start to look outside yourself for a rescue net, if you will, or a landline, or reach out to a friend who may say the right thing to you that can push you into getting the help that you need. Let me ask you something as we transition
Mhm.
to the younger folks. Has the problem developed more in this generation from, let's say, like a young man pulling the ponytail of a girl he liked to something else? Now, are there magnified issues of dysfunction in the way males and females treat each other on a sexual level? As opposed to the innocent image of back in the day when a guy would just be in class and pull on a girl's hair uh, to because he liked them.
Mhm. So, in thinking about that, I would kind of say, I don't know if it's more so magnified, but I will say that our young people are exposed to so much so early. So things that I may not have been exposed to, you have not been exposed, you may not have been exposed to at an early age. They are exposed to so much, and they have a lot of knowledge of what it's, what it's like and things that our parents kind of tried to guard us from until we were older, it's almost like that doesn't really happen anymore. Um, I think that our young people have really been impacted by the pandemic. And I think it means a part of that includes not knowing how to socialize because they were home, right? And particularly for those who don't have siblings, um, uh, they they now have to learn again how to socialize, how to deal with conflict resolution, how to problem solve, how to just navigate, do all the things that they once did just naturally. And because of the pandemic, it's now something almost like they're relearning. So just to, come back to your question, I don't know if it's magnified. I know that our young people are exposed to so much so early. Um, and so I think that's a big problem. I think that's a big.
Now, is the exposure due in part to social media?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Social media is a huge influence on our young people. They're on social media all the time. Like they fall asleep with the phone in their hand. I don't, the phone doesn't go down. And if you're not the parent that says, hey, after a certain time, you need to give me your phone and turn it off, right? Some parents are, and then we have some parents who have not put that boundary in place. They're on their phone all the time, or maybe when they're coming to the dinner table, they have their phone in hand. And again, if you're not that parent to say, hey, turn your phone off, we don't use the phone when we're having family dinners. Like we just need to hope and pray that they still having family dinners, because I don't even know if that's happening anymore. But those are all the opportunities that parents can kind of check in with their kids, the family dinners, when the family is sitting watching TV. Like those are opportunities for parents to say, hey, so how was your day? Or what's going on in school? Or those are the conversations, and those are the opportunities um, that parents can use to engage with their children. But you know, sometimes it happens depending on the family, and sometimes it doesn't. But social media remains to be a huge influence um, on our young people. And there's so
Yeah.
many platforms that I can't even keep up. The platforms keep changing, and even from middle school to high school to even our babies in elementary school, they are like really engaged in social media. Um, I personally feel way too early, right? Because if you don't understand the magnitude of social media, then you don't need to be on it. Like you don't understand that what you put out there stays forever, even though you may delete it off of your page. Then you don't need to engage in social media. So these are the conversations that we need to start having with our young people. These are the conversations that we try to have with our young people. In schools as a school counselor, these are important things that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, I was thinking that one of the missing components uh, in our social activity today is the parental guidance and boundaries. And half of it is because parents are more busy in this season than maybe in previous seasons, but also understanding, like you say, the power of social media.
Hmm.
Um, in your book, it
Hmm.
references three sections of feelings,
Hmm.
feeling the damage of the struggle, um,
Hmm.
and finally healing. Can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit about that?
So the book is divided into three sections because and it is a poetry book, and after each book there is a journal prompt, and I'll talk about that afterwards. But it reflects like the journey of a survivor, right? So when you have been abused and mistreated, and you feel like you are damaged, right? You feel like that you are beyond repair. You feel like you're not worthy of love. And and so that is like the beginning stages of the journey starting, feeling damaged and unworthy. And then you go through a part of struggle of journeying from damage to having this struggle of maybe I am going to be okay, maybe I am worthy. And that also is a process until you get to healing. Now, one of the things that I usually say about healing is that healing is not instantaneous, and it doesn't happen right away, and it's continuous, right? So we may have stuff that comes up for us as survivors. We may have triggers, and triggers could be something that we see. It could be a smell that reminds us of the abuse that has occurred. And part of that healing journey is putting support and putting strategies in place to combat those things as they come up, so you don't totally fall apart, right? Because, okay, I know what this is. I know I'm being triggered. Okay, so what can I do? That's when you access your support system. You use the strategies that you have learned, right, in therapy. That's one of the, the reasons why you go to therapy. And you have your support network. You have those that you can reach out to when you feel that way. And so healing is continuous, but we claim our healing and we walk in it. And so I think that's important to emphasize. So it reflects the journey of the survivor from feeling damaged and unworthy to struggling, kind of battling with that, and then finally walking into your into your healing, believing that you're healed, even though you may feel like you may have a trigger, right? Even though you know you may have a thought, I'm healed. I'm healed because God knows that I am worthy. He said I'm worthy. I'm worthy of love. And so I walk in that healing. You may have to go to therapy, back to therapy, because you may have, you may regress a little bit, but I'm still walking in my healing. So those are the three aspects of the book: damage, struggle to healing.
Got you.
Mhm.
And I, for the record, have a therapeutic journey. I go every other week to make sure that I keep my mind right because we
Yes.
want to do what's right in the natural as well as what's right in the spiritual. And together, we can navigate life on a higher level because life in 2022 is super duper challenging.
Yes, it is.
As,
Yes, it
as
is.
we transgress to child welfare, I was doing some research and I was reading about the reasons for risk factors, what contributes to child neglect that has been uncovered in the article I was reading is that there are risk factors that are commonly associated with maltreatment of the young ones, and children in families and environments where these factors exist have a great likelihood of experiencing maltreatment. And a greater understanding of the risk factors can help professionals like yourself, Siah, working with children and families to identify the stressors and the situations that put them in increased risk. And so, understanding what the stressors are with the family members can help family members overcome being in a situation where they take their stress and anger out on their child. And that being said, I was wondering, this is your area of expertise and your vocation. Can you speak to us about your experience and what you know to be challenging factors that cause maltreatment of children?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the times, it going back to what I said before, you do you repeat the behavior that you see, right? So for some parents, they grew up in an environment that was not healthy. They grew up in an abusive household, and then you have stresses like financial stressors that I can't pay the bills. I lost my job. I can't put food on the table. We have factors of being a single parent, as a single mom, and dad is not contributing to taking care of the kids. So a lot of it goes to stress factors as well as factors of what I saw looked like, what I thought was love and what I thought was parenting, because I know about parenting from of how I was raised and how my parents raised me. And if you don't see anything different, you're going to repeat that behavior. So it's not only how you were raised in your environment, it also has to do with environmental factors. Like we're still in the midst of this pandemic. People have had job loss, people have lost loved ones. All of those are stress factors and contribute to, I'm going to lash out, right, on my child. I may not, it may not be something that I want to do, that I'm doing intentionally, but it happens because I'm stressed and I don't know how to deal with it. And the root of that is I have to address all of those feelings. I have to address, why I'm stressed out. I'm stressed out because I don't have a job, right? So those are all factors that, it's almost like you're adding, you keep adding to the plate until that plate just tips over. And if you're not talking about those stresses in a continual manner with someone, right, they're just going to add up until you explode. And when we explode, unfortunately, we explode on our our partners, right? Or we explode on our children. And that's what unfortunately, that's what happens. So that does contribute to maltreatment, that contributes to abuse. Um, whether it's verbal abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's sexual abuse. Sometimes, as far as sexual abuse, we may allow our child to go to a relative's house or to a neighbor's house, thinking that that person is a trustworthy person that we've known, or someone that we met in a community that we know for years, and my child is comfortable around them. Um, that's how, a lot of times, how sexual abuse in children have occurred, and you may not hear them say anything about it for years. Depending on their age, they may not know how to verbalize that, or they may be in fear, of 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 being retaliated against from the abuser, so they don't say anything at all.
Tell me something. In 2022, is spanking against the law?
So, um, okay, so I'm going to say what, as school counselors, right? You are allowed what we are told, right, and the model that we have to follow. Um, or if you as a parent, you are allowed to discipline your child. However, when you start to leave marks and bruises, and that's when it becomes problematic. Definitely, it becomes problematic when, or if the child says, I'm afraid to go home, or the
Mm.
child writes something, the child may share something in the conversation. So something has to happen for the school to be alerted about that situation. And a lot of times it comes out in play, it comes out through writing, or it comes out, they may just verbally express it. It could be a lesson that the teacher is doing, or it could be a rapport that the child has built with the school counselor, a teacher, school social worker, and they are sharing these feelings. So as a school, we are obligated to address it. But as a parent, you are allowed to discipline your child. um, but when it comes to marks and bruises, that is considered to be excessive, and that's when it becomes a problem.
Oh, I heard that professional tone. Marks and bruises, don't you know? We're
Yes,
going to come
yes,
for you.
yes,
Expect me to knock on your door.
yes. that's when we have to kind of step in and say, hey, what's going on? And it's unfortunate because even as we talk about stressors, a lot of times parents discipline their children out when they're stressed, when they're
Sure.
frustrated. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that we try to encourage parents to do is don't discipline out of anger. Don't discipline when you're frustrated. Don't discipline when you're stressed, because then that's when it tends to be it comes out to be more excessive. And then it's like, okay, well, what did I do? And that's hard because kids' behaviors can be very challenging.
Sure.
Um, One of the models that we try to use is discipline out of love. So if you're always disciplined out of love, then it should not be excessive. Otherwise, then it's like, okay, so what is your definition of love? We go back to that. What were you shown as love? What did you see as love? So yeah.
Got you, got you. Now, how powerful of a motivator in child abuse is poverty or unequal distribution of resources?
It's very powerful, unfortunately, and that still goes on. There is more awareness about it, but it's an added stressor, right? It's an added stressor of I can't work, or I'm not able to work. I can't find a job, and so therefore I can't provide for my family. A lot of times when the summer comes and kids are out of school, for the most part, a lot of our kids are happy to be on summer break. But then you'll always find those few kids who are not happy because school is a constant, and it's a they get a lot. So that's why when we were on lockdown, um, as schools were closed, they weren't getting the breakfast, the lunch. So there's a lot of consistencies that children look for in being in school, and so that's a problem for a lot of kids. School is like a safe haven for a lot of kids, and we don't think of it like that because they're like, oh, we're on summer break and we're happy to be off. Not for a lot of kids.
Yeah,
Not
that's
for.
a different group of kids
Hmm.
that are happy to be out of school. Most of us in the urban areas, we look forward to the social aspect, the nutritional aspect, as much as can be provided by the Department of Education, but
Yeah.
also the community aspect, because a lot of times parents are stressed and are double and triple jobbing it and are allowing and even motivating young people to grow up sooner than they need to grow up. But
Yeah.
that
And
being said, go ahead,
mhm.
tell me
No, I was
more.
going to say a lot of times you see the older siblings having more of a parental role towards the younger siblings because all those things are happening, because I have to work all the time. I have to provide for my family, or you're talking about a single parent home when it's only one parent that has to carry, everybody. So a lot of times you will see an older child taking on the role of a parent of a younger child.
Yeah, I was watching a program the other night, my rare occasion to watch television to de stress. I think, unfortunately, it was a program called 911. But the lady was talking about she was stressing because she was concerned about being a bad parent. She had a newborn that she abandoned because she had an accident in the tub with the baby. And so she left the baby with the husband. And then when she came back and she was getting in the swing of things, she felt like, she could be being a bad parent. And she was talking to her brother. And he said, I know you're not a bad parent because you raised me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something, a lot of older sibling parenting goes on in my neighborhood. In closing, what
Mhm.
can be a few, I really enjoyed this time together.
Thank you.
Before we close with this last question, but I just wanted to let you know that you have been an asset to the Victorious Outcast tribe. The nuggets that you have left us with this evening will definitely allow us to level up in our self-care game, in our awareness of sexual and child abuse, and
Mm,
in just having great coping skills. And that's what the last question is about. What few major self-care tips can you leave us with to implement to survive the journey, if you will,
yeah,
that can have impact on maybe some previous traumas and help us overcome the outside, the external human dysfunction that is so
mm,
prevalent in 2022?
yeah, definitely. So I'm a big believer in journaling. I believe journaling is a way to get what's in your head out and put it on paper, and it's a release. So I'm a big believer in journaling, whether it's you're writing in a notebook or you're sitting on in front of a computer and you're typing it. It's a release, and a lot of times we tend to I can't think of the word, but it's we tend to have repetitive thoughts over and over again, and journaling helps us to get things out. So I'm a big believer in journaling. I also believe that therapy is self care because that's one of the ways that you take care of yourself. Um, I believe that sometimes we need to disconnect from social media um, and from the news because the news the news has been horrible lately as far as shootings and killings. So sometimes we need to know when enough is enough and I need a break. And particularly in the heart of the pandemic, right? We were glued to the TV watching the numbers go. Is it going down today? How many people were killed today? How many people, how many people died today? I'm sorry. How many people died today? How many people were hospitalized? We were watching the news constantly. And at some point, we had to disconnect. We had to say, you know what? That's it. Um, Exercise, I believe, is a wonderful self care, moving your body. For me, I love walking. Walking is very therapeutic for me, as well as journaling. I walk sometimes by the water. It's the season that I love cherry blossoms. I absolutely love them. And sometimes I just walk and I look at the cherry blossoms. Um, Having a great support system is awesome, particularly if you have survived trauma, if you have dealt with a recent loss, or a support a network are the people that know your situation, know what you have experienced, and will be that listening ear for you. So those are just some things that you can use to self care.
Well, I definitely will put them in my bag of self care tricks in order to move forward. I know I'm very challenged with managing my time and getting up early enough to go to the gym, and then I put it off and put it off, and then I wind up being stiff and feeling guilty. And I don't want that. Luckily, I get some exercise walking my dogs,
Yes.
but that's another story. Listen, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of Surviving the Journey with our special guest, Siah Hagin, and all the expertise that she brings with us, with her, to us. I am grateful for that. I'm humbled that she's here. I'm humbled that you're here. And together we are going to pay this wisdom forward so that we can build up this generation to be empowered to build up the next one. With that being said, I'm Destiny Dan, and I want you to walk good.